What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper. It is Friday, March 7th, 2025, and I have some breaking news to share with you guys. Right now it is 15:27 Eastern Time here in the United States, and we have some major breaking news coming in from Eastern Europe. But before I get into that, I want to just show you guys what we have going on over the U.S. this afternoon. We currently have U.S. nuclear forces on high alert for some reason. We have two nuclear war command and control planes up in the air. We also have two B-52 nuclear bombers up in the air, and we also have a B-1 strategic bomber over the Black Hills in South Dakota and Wyoming. And we also have a sub-hunter just north of the Bahamas, right off the coast of Florida. So last night, Russia attacked Ukraine with a large amount of missiles and drones. The Ukrainian Air Force reported that they used both their F-16s and, for the first time, French Mirage 2000 fighter jets to shoot down a lot of the Russian missiles. Okay, so for the first time ever, Ukraine used French Mirage 2000 fighter jets to shoot down Russian missiles. And Ukraine reported that Russia launched 194 drones and that they shot down about half of those. And 86 drones were suppressed with electronic warfare. Russia launched 35 Kh-101 cruise missiles from their Tu-95 bombers. Ukraine shot down 25 out of those 35. And Russia launched 8 Caliber cruise missiles from the Black Sea. The Ukrainians shot down all of those. They also launched 3 Iskander missiles. The Ukrainians did not shoot down any of those. And then they also launched 4 S-300s, okay? So last night, Russia launching a massive missile and drone attack on Ukraine, targeting their energy infrastructure, gas infrastructure, and also airfields, okay? Literally just 3 days after the Trump administration confirmed that they suspended intelligence sharing with Ukraine. Ukraine no longer has access to American satellite intelligence, which is critical for their defense and also for offensive operations. And also the U.S. has withheld all military equipment as well. Okay, so Russia taking full advantage of that moratorium on weapons, and Trump said that he is apparently strongly considering fresh banking sanctions and tariffs on Russia due to its attacks on Ukraine. But then he said this morning that it's been better dealing with Russia than Ukraine. He basically doubled down on his dislike for Ukraine and his support for Russia, and he said that Russia has been doing very well, okay, even after this massive attack last night. So let me just play a clip so you can hear what he said.
President Putin is bombing Ukraine.
Yeah.
Do you still believe him when he tells you that he wants peace?
Yeah, no, I believe him. I believe him. I think we're doing very well with Russia. But right now they're bombing the hell out of Ukraine. And
He said we're doing very well with Russia.
I think we're doing very well with Russia. But right now they're bombing the hell out of Ukraine. And Ukraine, I'm finding it more difficult, frankly, to deal with Ukraine. And they don't have the cards. They don't have the cards. As you know, we're meeting in Saudi Arabia on sometime next week, early. And we're talking, I find that in terms of getting a final settlement, it may be easier dealing with Russia, which is surprising because they have all the cards. I mean, they're bombing the hell out of them right now.
And Reuters is reporting that the White House has asked the Treasury Department to explore options for easing energy sanctions ahead of expected talks between Trump and Putin to end the Ukraine war, 2 sources said, speaking on the condition of anonymity. Okay, so Trump wants to ease sanctions on Putin, and Russia ahead of his meeting with Putin. And the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk announced today during a speech to the Polish Parliament that efforts are underway to prepare large-scale military training for every adult male in Poland. We plan to introduce a mechanism so that by the end of the year, every adult male will be trained in case of war. As a result of the security situation in Europe, he further stated that the Polish army needs to increase in size from 200,000 to 500,000. Tusk also appeared to express support for Poland's development of nuclear weapons, saying to Parliament Poland must pursue the most advanced capabilities, including nuclear and modern unconventional weapons. He also stated Poland would withdraw from the Ottawa Convention and possibly the Dublin Convention, which bans the use of anti-personnel mines and cluster munitions. Wow. So Poland will double the size of its army and introduce mandatory military training for every adult male in Poland. Okay, so you're talking about, I don't know, 20 million people, I don't know, something like that. There's about 40 million people in Poland, so maybe half are men, half are women. That is insane, okay? And then also talking about pursuing nuclear weapons and pulling out of treaties banning the use of anti-personnel mines and cluster munitions. So guys, get prepared, okay? Europe is preparing for war with Russia, okay? They just passed nearly a 1 trillion euro emergency defense fund. Okay, you don't spend $1 trillion on defense unless something big is about to go down. All right. And the Dutch Justice and Security Minister David Van Wiel said on Wednesday that citizens need to prepare to manage without the central government in case of a real conflict. The Dutch Justice and Security Minister David Van Wiel issued a recommendation on Wednesday for all citizens to compile 72-hour emergency kits in case of a natural disaster, cyber attack, or war. Netherlands residents really need to prepare themselves for a calamity. They must be able to survive on their own for 72 hours if war, a disaster, or a cyber attack paralyzes the country, Justice Minister David Van Wiel told local media outlets. The government has identified 5 key sectors that will get priority in this time of uncertainty, he said. These are logistics, electricity, water, food, healthcare, and the government. Until now, the government's advice has been for the Netherlands residents to have enough food and water in-house to survive 48 hours. The commitment to civil resilience must increase, Van Wiel said to the newspaper after meeting with his EU colleagues in Brussels on Wednesday. Van Wiel would like to see Dutch people get back to the preparedness levels of the Cold War. Back then, we knew what to do when the air raid sirens went off. Citizens simply had a task to perform in case of an emergency, Van Wiel said. After the fall of the wall, we dismantled defense and at the same time the entire civil defense system. Okay, so guys, another country preparing for World War III in Europe, and the German Red Cross sees major gaps in civil protection in Germany. In the event of war, there will be a lack of accommodation, medicines, and relief workers. 20 billion euros are needed in the short term. The German Red Cross does not believe that the German population is adequately protected in the event of a war. The turning point proclaimed by Chancellor Olaf Scholz has not taken place in civil protection, said the German Red Cross. Secretary General Christian Reuter to the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung said, 3 years later, we are still broke. Civil protection is not prepared for a war. There is a lack of accommodation for up to 1.7 million people. that can be used in an emergency, explained Reuter. In addition, there are neither enough people trained in disaster protection nor emergency capacities in hospitals or a safe supply of antibiotics. Okay, so we have Germany, we have the Netherlands, we have Poland, all very concerned about war. Okay, and Trump may be aiming at annexing the Great Lakes and possibly southeastern Ontario in a maximalist scenario, and also kick Canada out of NORAD, judging by first-hand accounts of talks between Canada and the Trump administration. The New York Times reports on first-hand accounts of what has been said in trade talks between the U.S. and Canada, which led to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau saying publicly on March 4th that he believed Trump wanted to annex Canada. Trump also mentioned revisiting the sharing of lakes and rivers between the two nations, which is regulated by a number of treaties, a topic he's expressed interest about in the past. Afterwards, according to the Canadian Toronto Star newspaper, Trudeau was overheard saying on a hot mic that Trump came armed with a list of trade and other irritants, and pointed to a 1908 treaty between the U.S. and Great Britain that established the 49th parallel as the boundary between the U.S. and the then Dominion of Canada, suggesting it could be erased. Specifically, 3 issues were raised. He wanted to eject Canada out of an intelligence sharing group known as the Five Eyes that also includes Britain, Australia, and New Zealand. He wanted to tear up the Great Lakes agreements and conventions between the two nations that lay out how they share and manage Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario. And he is also reviewing military cooperation between the two countries, particularly NORAD. Okay, so for those of you guys who don't know, Canada is part of NORAD. Okay, we have a whole bunch of radars in northern Canada, short and long range radars that look towards the Arctic, and also Canada has their F-18 interceptors primarily based out of Cold Lake, Alberta, that are responsible for shooting down any incoming Russian missiles from the Arctic. Okay, so Canada is vital to America's defense. During the Cold War, we also had the Distant Early Warning Line, or the DEW line, which was like in mid-Canada. Okay, also a radar line that detects incoming missiles. And Canada also is responsible for patrolling our coasts with their CP-140 Aurora sub-hunters. Okay, so Canada is critical to missile defense and to nuclear war for the U.S., and Trump wants to remove Canada from NORAD, and looks like Trump wants to redraw the border with Canada somewhere near Ontario, so this way the U.S. can have total control of the Great Lakes. Okay, pointing to the treaty between the U.S. and Great Britain that established the 49th parallel, suggesting that it could be erased. Wow. And the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni proposed extending NATO's Article 5 to Ukraine without granting it full membership in NATO. This proposal aims to provide Ukraine with a stable, lasting, and effective security solution. Okay, so basically they would treat Ukraine as a member of NATO, but they wouldn't officially be a member of NATO. And Europe is considering sending 120 fighter jets into Ukraine to protect their airspace and European airspace in what they are calling Operation Sky Shield. The proposed European-led air defense zone, separate from NATO, aims to strike Russian aircraft, missiles, and drones and help Ukraine's air force to launch strikes deep inside of Russia. Okay, so 120 fighter jets in Ukraine sent by Europe, okay, creating a no-fly zone essentially over Ukraine. And then Italy wants to extend Article 5 to Ukraine. Guys, get prepared. Things are escalating very, very quickly. We could even be invading Canada and Mexico soon, okay? And British officials held talks on Wednesday with representatives of about 20 countries interested in creating a coalition of the willing in support of Ukraine. And all 27 EU member states approved the EU's Rearm Europe program, which will make it possible for Europe to spend an additional 800 billion euros on defense. And the IAEA Director General says Iran has developed 5 new centrifuges for developing nuclear weapons since Trump withdrew from the nuclear deal. U.S. nuclear sanctions on Iran are failing, and more countries are considering developing atomic weapons amid global conflicts and a breakdown in diplomacy, according to the head of the IAEA. And the armed forces of Ukraine have been deprived of access to Maxar Technologies' satellite services. The company calls the official reason for the outage an administrative request. Okay, so the Trump administration asked Maxar to stop providing satellite intelligence to Ukraine. Absolutely huge. And the U.S. State Department is preparing to shut down almost a dozen consulates in Western Europe in the coming months. Okay, so our alliance with Europe is breaking apart, and looks like the Trump administration is retaliating against Europe for everything they've been saying and doing the last couple of days by pulling American consulates out of Europe. And by doing that, what that's going to do is harm American citizens that are in Western Europe, because they're no longer going to have access to consular services when they're overseas, okay? So whether you're on a vacation, you're on a business trip, or you have some kind of long-term trip planned to Europe, or if you're a dual citizen, the U.S. is going to shut down consulates, okay? And I think what Trump is trying to do here, and this is just my opinion, is he's trying to get Americans to leave Europe, okay, and come back to the U.S. if they're dual citizens, or if they have some, long-term stays. They don't want Americans in Europe. They want them to come back. And Emmanuel Macron rejected Vladimir Putin's comparison of him to Napoleon, arguing that unlike Napoleon, who led conquests, the only imperialist power in Europe today is Russia. He accused Russia of being a revisionist force that distorts history and the identity of nations. Wow. So very strong words there from Macron. And Macron also said that Europe should no longer buy weapons from outside of Europe, saying that the European community must identify where it is uncompetitive and fix it. Okay, so basically he's trying to reduce Europe's reliance on the U.S. for weapons and security. So guys, get prepared. Okay, NATO is breaking apart. The alliance between Europe and the U.S. is broken at this point, and Putin is going to take full advantage of this. I think he's going to attack Europe very soon before they have a chance to really build up their militaries. And the EU foreign policy chief said, "We are working to ramp up arms productions to speed up deliveries to Ukraine." And the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz are heading to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia next week to meet with Ukrainian officials, including Andriy Yermak, the head of the Office of the President of Ukraine. And Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi says that Gaza belongs to the Palestinian people. And Keith Kellogg, President Donald Trump's special envoy on Russia and Ukraine, stated that Ukraine bears responsibility for the U.S. suspension of war aid. He likened this unexpected decision to striking a stubborn mule with a 2x4 to get its attention. Kellogg emphasized that Ukraine had ample opportunities to sign a crucial U.S. mineral rights sharing agreement linked to a yet-to-be-defined post-war security strategy. And 2 B-52s from the U.S. did live-fire exercises in Finland, escorted by Finnish F-18s. They dropped JDAM bombs on a missile range in Finland. Okay, that was earlier this week. We were tracking those B-52s, and last night we had 2 more B-52s take off from the UK, and they went down to the Middle East again. Okay, so these B-52s are doing a lot of training exercises, live fire training, and deterrence patrols in the Middle East and in the Baltic. We also had a lot of reconnaissance in the Baltic last night after those airstrikes on Ukraine. We had 2 private recon planes in the Baltics and in Romania. We had an Estonian recon plane flying along the border of Russia and the Gulf of Finland. And then we had a Swedish recon plane in southern Finland. And interestingly, no American reconnaissance assets last night in Poland or the Baltics, which goes in line with the Trump administration announcing yesterday that they're no longer going to be supporting European countries if they get attacked by Russia unless they meet certain spending targets. And here we have a picture from the cockpit of a French Mirage 2000 over Ukraine, and this was apparently a Ukrainian pilot that shot down one of those Russian cruise missiles that were heading into Ukraine. But that's the latest breaking news that I have. I'm going to continue to monitor everything and update you guys accordingly. Check out my app in the Google Play Store. It's free. You can download it. There's a link in the description below this video. And the Apple version is coming out soon. Also, check me out on Telegram, Twitter, and Rumble. The links are in the description below this video as well. I post all my updates over there. And I use my app to send out notifications when things are happening. And also to let you know when I post new videos and when I go live. But until the next time, take care, God bless, and don't forget the 3 Ps. Prepare, practice, and persevere.